Hey everyone, just a few quick things before we get started. Don't forget to sign the attendance sheet. It's just real simple. Just ask you 2 questions. Kind of looks like this. But that's pretty much it. Please enjoy. Hope you all learned something. Okay, so in today's video, we're going to be going over for loops. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to stop by my office hours or up here in the header. But let's get started. So the first question I have is, when should you use a for loop? And so, like in comparison to a while loop, right? So a for loop should be used when you know the number of iterations. For example, if you know that it has to be like less than a certain number, or like if you know, like if the user inputs gives a number, but you know it can't be like more than the user's input number, that's like a known number of user iterations, even though you don't specifically know the number. Or if you know it's only supposed to have 5 iterations, that's a good idea to use a for loop then too. So my next question is, how do you write a for loop? So we're going to start with for, right? And then we do open parentheses, oops, not capitalized. And then, so this first part is going to be your counter variable, right? That we talked about in the last video, except these are going to be incorporated inside the for loop. So usually I do int I is equal to 0, and you can initialize it in there, that's fine, and then a semicolon, right? And then your next part is going to have 3 parts, okay? So your first part is your counter variable, and then separated by a semicolon, and then your second part is going to be the expression you want to test, separated by a semicolon, and then the third part is going to be the counter variable increasing or decreasing. And then you want brackets like always, and your code goes inside. And so that's how you write a for loop. Just remember that there's 3 parts: your counter variable initialization, your expression, and your counter variable incrementing or decrementing. And you use semicolons to separate them. Okay? And so what kind of loop is a for loop? Last video we talked about how a while loop is a pretest loop and a do while loop is a post-test loop. So let me actually go back over here so you can kind of see how it works. So a for loop is it sets I equal to 0, and then it tests the expression. If the expression is true, then it runs the code. After it gets back to the bottom, it'll loop back up, increase the counter variable, and then it'll test the expression again. And then and if it's true, go through your code, increase the variable again, and test your expression. And once it's false, it just breaks. So after hearing that, you can kind of be able to tell that a for loop is a pretest loop, because it tests the expression before running the code, right? And so the next question I have is, can you create a for loop with a while loop? So the only difference between the for loop and the while loop is that the for loop has a counter variable built in. So if we could do while, let's just give it some fake expression. I++, and then we declare I up here. Oops. I really wish Word would stop auto-capitalizing stuff for me. Anyways, so now you can see, well, it looks a little different. So the for loop is going to be nicer and like more compressed. This while loop will do the exact same thing as this for loop if your expression was I is less than 8, right? And you don't have to use I, but that's typically what we use for the for loop, so that's just what I did with you. But so all you need to do to create a for loop with a while loop is a counter and then increment it, typically by 1, that you can do more or decrement it. I guess so the answer here is yes. Yes. Okay. So we'll put yes by using a counter. Okay. So the next question I have is, what is the number of iterations for this loop, and what is its output? So a little trick for figuring out iterations, 0, less than or equal to, less than or greater than, I'll put it in parentheses, a number, we'll just call it x, that is going to be x number of iterations, x iterations. Now if you had 1 less than, or we're just going to put less than, and it's just also going to be greater than. Less than x, that's going to be x minus 1 iterations. Okay? And then if it starts at 0, but you have less than or equal to x, then it's going to be x plus 1 iterations. And if it starts at 1 and it's less than or equal to x, then it's going to be x iterations. So that's a little shortcut, but if you're in doubt, you can kind of just go through it yourself and test it. And so that's what we'll do for here. But actually, let's think about what the shortcut would give us, and then as we do it, we'll see if it's right or not. So we start at 1, so we either have less than or equal to. We have less than, right? So it says it's going to be x minus 1 iterations. So 13 minus 1, 12 iterations. So we should get 12 iterations. Right? And let's do the output, and let's count how many times it loops. So we first start off with j is equal to 1. Yeah, 1's less than 13, so even the loop, and it's counts, if j is equal to 12. J is not, so we skip, and we loop again. So now j is 2. 2 is less than 13. So, in line, actually. And then, so 2 is less than 13, so we see out it again. We see out now again. 2 is not equal to 12, so we go back up. J is now 3, which is less than 13, so see out na. Still not equal to 12 though, so in the loop, go back up here, increase j is equal to 4. 4 is still less than 13, see out na again. 4 is still not equal to 12, so we don't do anything there. So once we get here, we go back up again to where j is 5, and that's less than 13, so we do na. So we go here, then it's not equal to 12, so we go back here, increase j to 6. So 6 is less than 13, so so see outs again, and then 6 is not equal to 12, and then it increases to 7. 7's still less than 13, so we see out again. 7's not equal to 12, so we go back up. J is now 8. 8's less than 13. Print out see out, or see out now, or NA, and then it's not equal to 12, so hit the end of the loop. Then increase j to 9. 9 is less than 13, so see out it again. And 9 is not equal to 12, so go down, hit the end, go back up, increase j is now 10. 10 is still less than 13, so we do it one again, see out again, and then 10 is not equal to 12, so increase j again. J is 11. 11 is less than 13, so we print out na. 11 is not equal to 12, and then we increase j again to 12. 12 is less than 13, and then 12 is equal to 12, so we put out Batman, and then we inline, increase j to 13. 13 is no longer less than 13, so that loop breaks and it ends. Okay, and so let's count. Alright, look, see, 12 iterations. So, and the last one is like the Batman is still part of the same iteration, right? Because it printed out 2 things in that one last one. So you can see that 12 iterations was right, and so we do get that output. Yeah, so this is the output you would get. Okay. And so that's it for the questions. I'm going to open up Online GDB so we can do the code. Okay. So you have Online GDB opened up, all set up. And so the code is write a program that asks the user for a positive integer between 3 and 13 to use for the length of a rectangle. The width of the rectangle will be 5, and the program should display a rectangle of the given size using X. And so this is just like the last video, in case you didn't see it. Basically, we just want something that looks like has a width of 5, and then like if you use the minimum, and then if you use the minimum input of 3, it would look like this. So a rectangle of 5 width, and then 3, so 5 columns and 3 rows, right? Alright, so let's start by taking the user input. So we can do cout. We're just gonna copy this part into a integer between 3 and 13, inclusive. Okay, and then cin the length. So we need to create a variable for the length. And remember, with your cin, you do want the arrows to be pointing towards the variable. And we don't need to initialize it because the user is going to be giving us an input. Okay, and so now that we have that done, we can now create the rectangle. So just like last time, we're obviously going to need a loop. This video is about the for loop, so we will be using a for loop. And so we can do for, and we usually do int I, right? And let's set it equal to 0, that's because that's what I like setting mine at. But you can set it equal to 1, your expression will change a little bit. Speaking of expressions, we have to print this out length times, right? So if we go look at the cheat sheet, we need length. So we can either do 1 and less than or equal to length, or we can do 0 to less than length. I personally prefer this one, it's just a personal preference. You can use whichever one you want. That's what I'm going to use. So we can do I less than length, semicolon. Then we need to increase it, right? And we only want to increase it by 1 each time. So we can just do I plus plus. Open up the brackets, and we can just cout. And because we know the width already, we can just cout all 5 x's. And an inline, and let's run it and see if we get. Let's enter in 3. Ooh, yeah. Let's do 7. That looks about right. 3, 4, yeah. And then let's do 13. Yep, that's a lot of x's. And so you can see, if you watch the last video, essentially it's the same as the while loop and the do while loop. You can notice, however, we didn't have to create an extra variable for the counter because it's already included in the for loop, right? And so this is just an example of why you should use a for loop when you have a known number of iterations, because it's really easy just to make it iterate that many times. You don't have to worry about forgetting to increment your counter variable. But that's it for this question. That's it for this video. If you have any questions, feel free to stop by my hours, shoot me a message over Discord, or just email me. But thank you all for watching. Thank you all for making it all the way through this video. Here's a little way of saying thank you.